All right. Thank you so much. So excited to be back today. I'm chatting with Lindsay Phillips, CEO of Smooth Business Podcasting, host of the Leverage Your Podcast show, and a total pro when it comes to turning podcast interviews into powerful business growth tools. Lindsay works with online business owners and thought leaders to help them leverage their guest appearances, transforming interviews into high-value content that builds authority, generate leads, and keeps working long after the episode airs. She's also the creator of the podcast Leverage System and the 3-step roadmap for conversations that convert, where she helps guests reverse engineer their message so it actually supports their offers and drives results. So if you've been showing up on podcasts, but you're not seeing the growth or traction you want, you are going to love this episode. So Lindsay, I'm so excited to have you on here today and to dive into this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Me too. Yeah. And of course, you've been on my show. And I love chatting with you any which way.
Yes, I know. And we just connected, but like probably a month ago, and we've already got to talk like 3 times, and it's so fun. So great. I am excited. All right. I always love to start with story. And naturally, I'm a storyteller, but I love to just hear a little backstory about who you are and how you found your way into the world of what you're doing now, podcasting, and how you help your clients. So you go right ahead and share your story, and
sure.
We'll go
it's a winding road.
I love it.
I know, it's been crazy. I used to actually export vehicles to the States as an entrepreneur. So I have been in business for quite a while, but that's like feels like a lifetime ago.
Okay.
I know. But then as I had young children, I got into the VA space and was working part-time as a VA. I was making like not that much money on my other job. It was like $11, $14 an hour. And I was dabbling in with the VA work, and I loved it and wanted to just, A, make more money, but B, be home with the kids and this and that and have a better lifestyle. And so I actually quit the other jobs and went all in. And just had a couple of clients and have just grown ever since, made the agency, brought on team members, morphed down to content marketing, niche down again to podcasting. And now I really just want to focus on guests and helping them create more impact and really leverage and repurpose what they're doing to get better results. So I love it. It's funny how your path just.
Yes, exactly. Where one thing turns into the next, and then you just really discover it is that what you're passionate about and what you want to do. But also I've been talking about a lot of like aligning our business and our offers with the way we want to show up as a business owner, as a mom, as a wife, as a, whatever we are, but our personal lives have to like blend with our businesses and how we're showing up. And so for you, I know you said in the beginning, like the switch to being a VA and doing your own online business was, yes, like to make more money, but also to be home more with your kids. And so is there a moment where like, now that you've moved on to podcasting and setting up your agency, like where things just clicked and you knew this was like what you were meant to be doing?
Yeah, like I've always loved doing it because I love working one-on-one with clients. I've never been the type that like, oh, I just want to sell online courses. That to me feels like transactional. I know it's passive income and like it's made people a lot of money, but I just love the interaction with my clients. Like it's more boutique, with the coaching and working with them one-on-one. That part I love, but I also love the written word and being creative and imagery. So to be able to do all of that, and I love teaching. So being on a podcast and hosting my own, like it pulls out little pieces of me, you know what I mean? And kind of just brings it all together.
Definitely. It lights you up, and you can tell, I know that when we've been talking, it's fun to just like, you can tell you have a passion for it and helping others. So let's just get right into it then. We talk about in the intro, I shared how, you use podcast guesting as a way to actually convert people to customers, right? And a lot of times I think people just go on podcasts, they talk about what they do, but then there's no like next step action for people to take. So share more about how you're helping people, or maybe some of the mistakes that you see when people show up as a guest, and how maybe they can fix them, or what little shifts to make.
A ton. And I was literally just talking to someone a couple of weeks ago, a prospect, and I was like, oh, what is your business? Like, what is your goal from being on a podcast? And she had a book, which is great. And she was just like, oh, I just want like more exposure. And it was like, oh, I just like answer questions and, people will find out about me. And like, that was it. And I was like, oh, like it just hurts my heart, like honestly, because I'm like, one, you do need to have a goal and be very clear about it. Some people guest on podcasts because they do want more brand exposure, but some people want it only because they want to boost their authority and credibility and be seen as a guest expert. I mean, it allows you to do so many more things, raise your rates, the whole 9 yards. Some people are like, I want leads. I want to, have a lead magnet where someone gets on my list and then I can nurture them. And some people guest on podcasts because they want the connection with the host. They want to collaborate. They want partnerships. Sometimes they use it for sales, right? Like I want to get my foot in the door. So and I could go on. There's so many different reasons why you would want to guest on podcasts. And so your approach will be different depending on what it is that you want. And for me, I focus on guests that are using guesting to grow their business. So they need to have a program, a product, a service, and yes, have lead magnets. That is easy to fix. But the being a guest is kind of like that top of funnel, right? It's getting you that exposure. So that is like one of the foundational pieces, is really understanding, and not to do it to just, oh, everyone's guesting on podcasts. I need to get out there and do it. Like you need to be strategic.
Definitely. And so this kind of came up too, as you were saying that, part of being strategic is, I'm assuming, like getting on the right podcast, right? Depending on what their goal is it they want to get on the podcast because the show host is their ideal client, or maybe their audience is the ideal client. Like, do you work with your people on that? Or what do you suggest for something like, what are the shows that they're supposed to be looking?
I don't book clients, but I do work with a lot of different podcast booking agencies and partner with them and so forth. But it's really thinking about, what audience do you want to get in front of? I find a lot of people are, oh, I want to be on this big name show, or I want to get on this show because they have like thousands of downloads. The spray and pray method and getting in front of, thousands and thousands of people may not be your ticket. Like for me, if I'm serving podcast guests, I want to be on a show where their audience is also looking to guest on podcasts. And so you have to really think about, who is the host serving? Like, who are their clients? And that's easy. Just look at their website. And who is their audience? Would they be your target market? Would they be your ideal client? And if they're not, then I don't think it's a good idea to be on that show unless there's some other specific reason. So really think about, who are their clients and who is their audience?
Definitely. And I know one thing, you and I had talked about is like, you really help them, kind of what we were just talking about, but reverse engineer like what they're doing, their message that they're talking about on that specific podcast based on their offers. So can you maybe walk us through what that looks like?
Absolutely. And this is a huge mistake. I find even the industry, right? Like they're so focused on how to get booked on shows, how to pitch, how to do your one sheet, and then maybe like how to promote it and be like a good guest, be polite and all those kinds of things. But it's the conversation that happens that has to be strategic. So a podcast topic may be interesting, but you have to look at it in the perspective of, is this conversation going to be the bridge between the audience's pain, what is relevant to them, and your offers.
Mm.
You know, I could come on a show and talk about email marketing all day long because I've lived it and been in it for many years. I don't have any services that relate to that. So it would be pointless for me from a business perspective to be on podcast talking about email marketing. So you really have to think about like thinking about your avatar. What are their biggest pain points? What connects from that to what are your offers? What program do you really want to get them into the most? And then that conversation, like, okay, here's the title, the topic. You want the topic to be super hooky and not generic. I've learned this lesson. So I remember I hired a podcast booking agency, and I think my topic was at the time content marketing, but it was like, I can't even remember what it was. It was super generic, like the 411 on content marketing, or how to use content marketing in your business to grow. Like, wah, wah, like how boring can you be? And it doesn't help guide the host on what to ask because it's so generic. If it was the top 3 tactics in content marketing that will attract clients faster, that is a little bit more specific. And then the host is like, oh, they're going to share 3 things. So I know how this conversation is going to go. But even looking at the listener's perspective, once it's shared, it's out on Apple and Spotify and it's on show notes. If they look at the title, because that's like the front cover of a book, basically, right? If they don't understand what it means and how it relates to them and what they're going to get out of it, they're going to move on and listen to a different episode. So that topic is like your billboard for the show, for the episode, but also for the listener. And so the topic is super important. So that, yeah, that's just another mistake that can easily be fixed.
Oh, I love that you bring that up because I think that's so important, like with everything you're doing, right? And I say that a lot when I talk about messaging, because not only is it, your message shows up everywhere. And you just, made that clear, like on podcasts, the number, like it's so important to have a strong title, to have a strong like name for your talk and what you're going to cover. Because you're right. I've been scrolling, like I go to someone's podcast that I typically listen to and I scroll and I'm picking an episode based on the title. So that title has to be really strong. It has to show me exactly what I'm going to get out of it. And is it solving one of the problems that I currently have? And it's just like, that's what I tell my clients. That's what I preach every day is like, we have to talk to what our clients want solved and how they say it. So how are we going to get that across? So, I love that you bring that up because I think that's gold. Like not only for yourself being able to lead the conversation, but so that someone else knows what to ask you. They know what you're going to talk about and how it's going to help them.
100%. And believe it or not, the one sheet that you give to get pitched on could be the one thing that is sabotaging the conversation and your results. So picture this.
Tell me more.
So you're a host, right? So you get a one sheet and there are 3 interview topics. Hopefully one is like hot and sexy and you want to book them. And then typically the one sheet will have like 7 to 10 interview questions. But often those interview questions are like about your journey, kind of like about what you know in general, what you've learned in your business. And maybe there's like 2 questions that relate to one of the topics, and then 2 questions that relate to the second topic, and so on. So it's a mishmash. So what happens is the host, by default, they don't know what your expertise is. They don't know what you really want to talk about. So they take that and run with it. And I've seen this with my clients years ago, creating their reels. And I'm like, I'm having a hard time pulling out little nuggets. I'm having a hard time picking a title for this episode because it's all over the place. And so the conversation is off on all of these tangents, and you don't come across as the authority, and you're not being positioned in a way that you want to be positioned. You don't have the chance to talk about your, podcast leverage system or your framework that is getting your clients these results. And so that's part of the reason why the audience is left feeling super confused. They're having a hard time following, but they're not seeing how you can help them and what the solution is. And then also on another layer of this is that, the conversation's all over the place. And at the end, you give a lead magnet, let's say, or a resource. They're not understanding the reason why they need to grab that resource because the conversation hasn't led them to that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's why my one sheet is not one sheet, it's 2 sheets.
I was just going to say, can you share some tips of like maybe how they can, put together a one sheet that actually makes sense and leads the conversation?
And it's okay if you have that one sheet. I'm not saying it's like, the worst thing, but not all hosts will ask you, what questions do you want me to ask in the episode? Don't be afraid to give that to them. Hey, here's the topic that we chose. Fantastic. Here are some questions that you can use so that we totally give a ton of value to your audience. Like, take that control back. So what I have my clients do when we work in the podcast conversations that convert is that not only do we reverse engineer, of course, the pain with the avatar and your offers, but once you've got the topic, really think strategically about what those interview questions are and have them be punchy versus like, oh, what are the 3 mistakes? Like, no, what are the 3 mistakes that are costing you leads when you're guesting on podcasts?
Mm-hmm.
Because then the host knows, oh, damn, like that's going to give me some juicy nuggets. And when the host asks that, the audience will know exactly what you're about to deliver. So you're hooking them into the conversation a little bit more. And then you want to actually map out your talking points. What are you going to share and how are you going to answer that? Not, oh, I'm just going to wing it and answer this question on the episode and we'll just see how it goes. Be very strategic about how you're answering. You don't want to be scripted, but you do want to have that guiding light. So, and then you want to have the opportunities to give like showstopper stories and sound bites that illustrate those points. And when you have those talking points laid out and you have those like story sound bites planned out, it just rolls off your tongue. It's super concise. You come across confident and you just captivate the audience in a bigger way that draws them in and you look like an expert.
I love that.
Yes. And it gives you the ability to seed your programs and see the results that you're getting with your clients. So that is super impactful.
Yes. And I was laughing because I'm like, okay, I'm thinking in my head, like, one, I could either be like the worst podcast host or the best, because I'm like, sometimes I don't even look at the questions and I look at the questions, but I make my own form of them because as a copywriter, I get like sometimes so in my head of like, okay, we need to make sure this actually sounds like a good question and is natural and something they want to hear. But I love what you're saying of like, if you can provide the host like me, those questions, I'm not having to take all the time to like do it before, or worse, looking at something that maybe doesn't even make sense. So that is huge. Like, I love that tip. And then having the talking points in front of you is huge. And like you said, you don't want to sound scripted and like you're reading from it. But I know for me, even though I know what I'm talking about, it's helpful to have something in front of me in case like I get off track, or it makes the conversation so much more powerful. So I really like that you share that as well, because I think there's a lot of times we're just winging it when it lands so much better. There's a clear path after if you have it planned out.
Absolutely. And even if you did have a framework, a script, I mean, we're two people. We're going back and forth. Some days you're more energetic than others. And so you say things slightly different every single time, and that's totally fine. That's what makes it a conversation and feel organic. But you know in your head what your talking points are and some very specific phrases. And again, like if I'm talking about my podcast leverage system, I'm using that term versus just talking about things in a broad and general way. I was just working with someone last week, and we took together their talking points, but I took their talking points and rejigged it so that things were named. Like she had an exercise that she took her client through, but I gave it a name so that like, oh, when I took my client through this process, this exercise, they felt this and they had this outcome. So it just has more impact, and the listener can visualize the impact that it could have on them. And when you name things, you just give yourself that extra credibility and that there's something that is proprietary to you, and it differentiates yourself from everybody else out there. You want to be relevant, but you also want to stand out.
Yes. Oh, I love that you're saying that. We actually just went through that in my accelerator program the other day, of like making sure you have some type of core method or process that you're talking about, because it builds that credibility. It feels more established, right? Like you get results. And a lot of people, like, they're doing the same thing with all their clients. They have a process or a method, but they've never named it. But once we give it a name, it gives it legs. It gives it the ability to be more out in the world, to, like you said, it just has that effect where it gives you so much more credibility and allows you to talk about it in a way that makes sense too.
Yes. And instead of, it's hard to explain a visual, but when you're talking back and forth about concepts, it's like the words are all out there, but it takes a minute for the listener to let it land. But when you say, oh, I have, this process, here's how it goes, here's the results, it's almost like the person can compartmentalize that chunk of information, and it's easier for them to sort it through their mind.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense or I'm saying it the right way, but
100%.
You become more memorable. They remember what you say, and they can process it differently.
And another thing with that too is it allows you to stand out maybe from all of the other people out there that are doing something similar to you. It shows you why what you're doing is a little bit different, better, faster than what they've done or tried before.
Yes.
And so I think having that core process or method, it just helps you stand out and gives you that kind of leg up too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And something I want to go back to what you said too is, not feeling like the conversation is all over the place, but when you have, a name of your program or you have those talking points, even if the conversation does go off, it allows you to be able to bring it back, right? And I think that is really important too, because then you can, I know I've been on an interview like this before where we like totally went off, and it's like, okay, let's tone it back in, because then it made me start feeling like, oh no, are we really talking about what we came on here to talk about? And, then you get inside your head and all the things. So like, do you see that happening a lot too?
100%. So if you, in the beginning of a conversation, say, oh, there are 5 mistakes that come up time and time again. And then you, even just saying that one sentence, and then, you get into one of the mistakes, you get into maybe the second mistakes, but they're going to remember that you said there were 5 mistakes. And people do not like open loops. So they naturally will circle back and say, oh, I remember you said there were 5 mistakes. What are the other 2? So that way you're keeping that conversation in, but you can even refer back. Oh, I just want to take a step back a minute because we only covered 2 of the mistakes. There are actually 3, and I want to make sure your audience is aware of all of them. Do you mind if I mention the other 3? So there are ways that you can bring that back because it shows that you want to deliver value to the audience, but you also have that reference point to be able to pull it back. So again, there's some of those language tricks that you can use to help guide that conversation and keep it on track.
I love that. That is really, really helpful. And so another thing we talked about was they show up on the podcast, right? You're helping them through their message, making sure we have all those right talking points that are pulling the people in. But then after the interview, we want to make sure that it lives on, right? That it's driving that visibility you're talking about. It's pulling in the leads. It's making those conversions. So what do you often recommend to your clients or people that you work with to, if it's something they're guesting on, how can they make sure that that interview isn't just there and gone, right? Did that, check it off my list. Now we have to share it everywhere.
I think the first step, Hailey, is really looking at your mindset on guesting. I find a lot of guests rely on the host to do all the heavy lifting. Oh, I'm showing up on their show. Their audience is going to hear me and naturally want to call me, blah, blah, blah. Or they rely on the host. They're going to share it with all of their channels, their email list, their social. I'm good. But not every host knows how to market or market well. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So I've guested on a lot of shows over the years. And I remember being on a show. It went live, fantastic. They had a show page, great, but the title was so vague and it was a play on my business name. So it was like, I don't know, how to smooth sail your content marketing. Super generic, the title that they had. They didn't even have bullets or timestamps on what I covered on the episode. It was my bio and 2 sentences. And so to me, I'm like, oh, the audience is going to have no idea what the show is about. They're not going to know how I'm going to help them or serve them on the episode. So likely they're going to bail. And if that's all that's being put out into the world for that episode, I'm hooped. So you can take the control back. I always ask for the video from the host to say, I would love to create reels for you and get you more exposure. What host is going to say no? I would hope. But you can create your own title. You can tweak the title. It's okay. You can create your own image so that it's your branding. You can create your own show notes because, of course, when you've got the video or the audio, you can get your own transcripts and so forth. Create your own blog post on your website with all of those assets, embed the video and so forth. Because what happens is when someone's going to your website, and same with if they're looking at you to book you on their show, and they see there's a bunch of blog posts on your website where you're a guest here, a guest there, they're naturally going to see you in a different light and they're going to see you in action. So you're going to land more opportunities. But also when your prospects are going on your website, they're going to see what your expertise is about, your body of work, how you're going to help them and get a feel for you. Right, with video, you see people, you read people. And so you can create these assets for yourself and not rely on the host. So that is super crucial. And then you can create your own reels, your carousels, your quotes, email to your list, LinkedIn article. If you have the video and the host is fine with it, you can put it up in your own YouTube channel. Always reference back to the host and say that, that you were featured on this podcast. You always want to give props and exposure to the podcast itself. But again, you can take that control back and promote it and position yourself how you want to be positioned.
I think that's so just gold, right? Because the more that, just talking about this too, the more that people can see us, hear us, experience us, the more likely it is that they're going to say yes to work with us, right? If they feel that connection and that pull, and especially now in the time of AI, and I know I've said this over and over again, but I think it's so important, is we have to show up in a real, authentic way. They have to be able to experience us, because most of the time, especially if you're a coach or, you're working one-on-one with people or you're showing up to serve them, a lot of times they're buying the experience of working with you. Like they connect with you because there might be a million other people doing exactly what you're doing, but it's how you're positioning the outcome of what they're going to get. And it's you, right?
Yeah, 100%. It's all relationships. It's all,
And so the more that you can just take control and share it, post it on your website, on a blog, share it everywhere, because it's not just getting exposure, it's building your credibility. And I think that's so, so, so important. And just building that trust, because especially in the world we're in today, like trust is big. And there's just a lot of things happening that may lead people to not trust as much, which is
absolutely.
We could go on a tangent about that, but we're not going to. We'll keep it in line. But I love that you shared that, because I do think it is very important.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to use it for your own gains, because really, when you think about it, the host is sharing it, right? But they're pushing all the traffic to their iTunes, their own show page. But when you take that control back, you can push the traffic back to your own website. But you can even use the reels, create a carousel, but have it push to a lead magnet, or have it talk about how you help your clients. And hey, if this sounds good, shoot me a DM or put this word in the comments and we'll hop on a call. So you can use that content to drive traffic and get more leads and clients.
100%. And I think just, shifting from what we're talking about, we have what we're doing on it, what comes next, but also I really like to dig into kind of, how we talk about building our business around our strengths and aligning with how we want to show up, kind of like what we talked about in the beginning. But I think this goes back to the way that people are showing up on podcasts, they're guesting. So what do you have like a mindset that you help people with? Or is there a shift that like maybe helped you grow while staying true to like who you are? I'm sorry, that was kind of all over the place, but
I know what you're getting at though. I hear you. Because this is hitting home for me. I find in the past couple of, I guess the past 6 months, really, I'm kind of, how do I put this? Not listening to so much to like what's going on in the marketplace, how I should market my business, what launches I should do. And I'm leaning more into, okay, for lack of better terms, what are my superpowers? Like, why do my clients hire me? Why do they like me? Like, what is so different about me and my innate talents? And what am I bringing to the table that my clients love? And so really looking at like, what is inside of you versus what do I do?
I like that.
And when I was at this soul leadership event in February, and that really hit home. And it was like all these people that were there, they were all very purpose driven. And I always had a hard time connecting that, because I'm like, oh, I'm not helping people transform their sorrow into, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, it's businessy. How do I like, but I am passionate about what I do and helping guests to create more impact and be seen and heard and get more leads. But I was like, oh, I need to bring more of myself into my business. So I've been really figuring out how to do that and how to bring that language and how to open that up about myself. which is a hard thing to do sometimes. I was like, it's an exercise.
Yes, so much. And sometimes we're so in it that it's hard to see from where we are, right?
Oh,
Like, I love that you say, like, well, I'm not doing like all of this amazing things, and it's like, I had a gal I was talking to earlier, and she's like, I was in this, at this event, and there was all these like mission driven, and they're,
yeah.
helping the poor and doing this. And she's like, and I just felt like I was doing nothing. And then she went on to explain later how she is helping veterans share their story and build their businesses. And I'm like, girl, like,
I know.
that's amazing stuff right there. And just how you said, like, you're helping business owners leverage what they're doing and grow their businesses even more. But sometimes we're so like that it's hard to see it.
I know. And one of the things that I found transformational was thinking about your clients' problems in like, what is their external problem? Like, what do they think is the problem? What is the internal problem? And what is the universal problem? And it's like, oh, I never talk about the internal stuff. I always talk about like the nitty gritty. And I'm like, ooh. And like when you're a guest on a podcast and it falls flat, like how does that make you feel? It makes you second guess. Do people even really want what I have? My message isn't important. Now I'm going to change this. I'm going to change that. Like you lose your confidence and your drive, maybe even for what it is that you're passionate about, because you start second guessing yourself. And it's like, oh, there is that emotional part kind of built in. And I've just never thought about it from a marketing perspective. And so I'm trying to figure all this out, but I'm leaning into that.
Yes, definitely. It's such a great point that you bring up, because I do that a lot with my clients is inside of the accelerator, a lot of times they'll bring their work and I'll review it. And when we're looking at the words on the page, it's always like, okay, but let's go one step below the surface level. What are they really saying they want, but how's it showing up for them in their lives? How is it actually, altering their day to day? What's showing up? So we can say stress and anxiety all day long, but what's that causing?
Yeah.
Right. So it's just one step below the surface level. And that's where you can really bring in that emotional pull, because we know that people make decisions based on emotion, not just logic alone. And so like you were saying, even how people are talking on the episode, the things they're talking about, make sure it's aligning with how your ideal client is feeling, what they're saying, how these problems are showing up for them, because I think that's going to allow it to resonate that much more, just like what you were saying.
100%. And again, like working with my clients, they'll say, oh, I do this, and this is how I help, and this is how it helps them. And I'm like, okay, but like, what is the actual exercise that you get them to do? Like, what is your method? What is your thing? What is, like, explain to me more instead of these general terms. And so then they like share more stories, and like, we really dive deep, and I'm like, oh, I get it now. And I'm like, you don't just do this, you do this and this. I'm like, my gosh, we need to communicate about that in a different way. Yes. And then it's like, and I'm pulling out more of like who they are and the impact it makes, because it's hard for them to talk about it. And I was like, I'm like, oh, that's my gift. Like I see like the brilliance in them and I pull it out. I see what they do differently and how to change that within a podcast interview. And so I'm like, how do I explain that in my marketing?
Right. And then for you, like, and for your clients, the benefit to them, like, they're not just talking better on a podcast show, right? Like they're not just having better experiences, but that's helping every part of their business, because they're having those aha moments like, oh, do this. That's important. Maybe I should talk about that more, right? Like it's those aha moments that cause us to like think differently, to act differently, to show up differently. And so when we can have those people like you walk alongside of us, it just makes it so much stronger, because as entrepreneurs, like we're so just like in it that it's really helpful to have people on the outside, like coaches or just mentors or people that you can boxer or voice message
Even
back
you,
and
when you're working with your clients, like I bet you pull some amazing juicy nuggets out of it, and they read your content or whatever you've written and they're like, oh, I didn't know I was that brilliant. Like you make them sound so much
Yes.
better than they think of themselves.
Oh, yes, I love it. Well, we could talk all day,
I
I'm
know.
sure of that, Lindsay, but I would love to round out our conversation. I always love to ask, how do you define success right now? What does it look like for you in your life and business?
I've struggled with that one. And I've always compared myself with others when it comes to success, which I know is wrong. But we all do it. And it's like, oh, I need to be making this amount of money. I need to be speaking on all of these things or do launches or have this. And it's like, it can burn you out. And so the past year, I've just really been kind of turning a corner on, what do I define success as? And to me, it's like having those one-on-one relationships with my clients, feeling good about what I'm doing, not being a stress puppy every single day, having some Fridays off and sleeping in a little bit here and there. So having time that's my own and having enough money to do the things that I want to do and not, less stress and simplify. I'm all about simplifying or trying to simplify.
I love it. I love it. And I think so often, like, those are the things that come up, and it doesn't, like, when we start to say it, it's like, oh, I didn't think of it that way. But it's so important to just define our own success instead of looking at everybody else's version of success. And that is really my goal, to inspire people to do what really feels good to them and what lights them up and makes them feel successful.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you so much for being here. I will have all your links in the show notes, but I would like you to just share a little bit. Where can people find you if they want to get better at guesting on shows and actually have something that brings them in clients from being on that show?
100%. So they can go to smoothbusinesspodcasting.com. And if they go to smoothbusinesspodcasting.com/resources, I have a 3-step guide that will help them repurpose and leverage, but I also have a worksheet as well that will help them lay that framework to create a conversation that converts. So whichever side they need help with, I love sharing resources.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Lindsay. I know you shared so much gold nuggets in this, so I appreciate it. I learned a lot, and thank you again.
Thank you.